In these books I have, there's some remarkable things about another old man. Old man, by the way, very old man. As a matter of fact, this man had been questioned for his mental capacity at the time. You know that? They questioned his mental capacity, accused him of being senile. Critics of his even went so far as to say that this specific person didn't provide a foundation for allowing those that came after him to do anything that had constitutional relevance. That's how he's characterized in one of these books I have here, right? Two of the people upon the court which he sat, opined with, they didn't do anything, didn't render any opinion that was constitutionally relevant, except that one of those people happened to author an opinion that is one of the three most important opinions in the history of banking and coinage in the United States, right? There's very, 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 very few considerations that are put on level with an opinion that that man provided. But somebody else, coming from a different concept, I guess, of what they consider to be constitutionally relevant, had said that they just didn't do anything that was constitutionally relevant in the 40 years between them on the bench. All right. Maybe somebody believes that, right? I'm going to read excerpts. This is not the specific case that I was reviewing last night. The case I was reviewing last night was actually from the Supreme Court of Texas. But in support of arguments I've already made, and I'm going to be following through on, that case would have needed some other reference points in order for it to have the kind of application and implication it does, and charges that were already put before both the Supreme Court of Texas and in the District Court of the Federal District in Texas, both in the Southern District and the Northern District at different times. And then were also presented to the Supreme Court of the United States. So I'm just going to read excerpts from this. Fletcher versus Peck, 10 U.S. 6 Cranch 87 1810. This is from the syllabus. If the breach of covenant assigned be that the state had no authority to sell and dispose of the land, it is not a good plea in bar to say that the governor was legally empowered to sell and convey the premises, although the facts stated in the plea as inducement are sufficient to justify a direct negative of the breach assigned. It is not necessary that a breach of covenant be assigned in the very words of the covenant. It is sufficient if it show a substantial breach. The court will not declare a law to be unconstitutional unless the opposition between the Constitution and the law be clear and plain. The question whether a law is void for its repugnancy to the Constitution is at all times a question of much delicacy, which ought seldom, if ever, to be decided in a doubtful case. The court, when impelled by duty to render such a judgment, would be unworthy of its station could it be unmindful of the solemn obligations which that station imposes, but it is not on slight implication and vague conjecture that the legislature is to be pronounced to have transcended its powers and its act to be considered void. The opposition between the Constitution and the law should be such that the judge feels a clear and strong conviction of their incompatibility with each other. Now, I contend that this provides a foundation for consideration of arguments I have put before the court in the last 4 years. On the other hand, in order for me to submit an original petition or to attempt an appeal in the manner that I would need to, without being remanded to doing so in the form of a pauper, it would cost $450. If I waited until tomorrow and the library was allowed to continue trying to extort me, I would have enough to do both. I would have enough that was on somebody else's line of credit to file too. to be able to file the one I had already declared my intent to file by a certain timeline, and perhaps one that's come up in the meantime because this illegal activity just refused to cease and desist. I'm intentionally depersonalizing it. So every day, you play this ceremony of something other than what is the actual, literal law and the actual, literal circumstances. Every day you do that, you need to understand by tomorrow, based on the scheme they set up with my identity, I would have had more than enough money to be able to file my own petition, this time not as a pauper. So you can't say that it wasn't that I couldn't pay. The question is, who was allowed to take my work and say it was theirs and then try to get me to pay for them to do something with my work? They do this frequently, over and over and over again. They haven't succeeded. Would it not be prudent at this point to understand who it is we're actually dealing with, as opposed to maintaining this projection that playing out this farcical scheme while we're also supposed to believe that we're dealing with a health pandemic and that we're dealing with national security threats on the US-Mexico border involving human smuggling and use of human smuggling in other forms of crime? I think these are very relevant. I will have to do a further examination, but I already know another opinion provided by this justice gives credence to my claims concerning the consideration of the Constitution itself being a form of contract between the people and the government. And not only that, but that argument is actually supported by more recent case precedent concerning waiver of immunity. Does that deserve to be compensated at a level where, in order to present that argument and to follow through on that constitutional argument in consideration of other constitutional issues, that I be able to actually literally be compensated according to what I'm capable of, so that then you can actually have that on credit? See, that would be the good faith and credit of the people. But when you remanded me to a pauper for refusing to engage in acts of prostitution, everything I did, you tried to make a debt. A debt that somebody else could lean on because they couldn't pay their own bills. I paid. Over and over and over again, I paid. I just would not consent. And you had no right to try to make me. It was a question you should never have asked to begin with.